Eye to Morocco. It's a very intriguing phrase. I was sitting in a bar in Krakow, in Poland, with my friend Tommy Jabinski. He was explaining about Oskar Schindler. We were in this cafe where a lot of activity had taken place during the Second World War. And as he was speaking to me, an incredible, beautiful woman walked behind him. And I followed her with my eyes, and he said, Ian, you have one eye to Morocco. No, I'm looking at that one. It's a Polish expression. The full expression is one eye to Morocco and the other to the Caucasus. Well, he couldn't explain exactly what it means, but you get the picture. You become distracted, or you take a different direction, and while still keeping focus on the political or the ethos or the protocol or your culture or whatever it is you're expected to be focusing on. In my case, Deep Purple. But I thought it was a wonderful way of describing the feelings you have when you're making a solo record. It is a distraction, and consequently it has to be different. So that phrase stayed with me, and I wrote it down as a kind of a focal point. Strangely enough, there was a song that also was a focal point. And when I was talking to Nick and Michael and the musicians, I said, every other song that we do on the record has to fit with this song, because that's the hub, that's the fulcrum. That phrase, I just thought, what a great name for an album, because it describes the situation perfectly. And then, of course, I thought, well, why not develop some lyrics for this song that I was talking about? And that became One Eye to Morocco as well, which has that sort of slightly Eastern flavour. You could imagine you're in Marrakesh or somewhere. The song One Eye to Morocco was a backing track, and I developed the melody with Steve Morris some years before, but we never found a home for it, and now it's become the front door of the album, the way in. Well, I write all the time, not always songs, but I write articles, poems, short stories. I've been trundling away over a book for the last 10 years. So if I get a song, I always like to leave a little bit so that it's actually finished on the session. We had about 38, 39 songs in various stages of completion that I'd written with Steve Morris, Michael Jackson, Rodney Appleby, and a couple I'd written on my own. And so in the end, we had to knock them down to a short list of 8, I think, 8 or 9 or 10. And then we added another couple on the session. It's always good to have something to work with at the last minute. That keeps it fresh. If all the songs are completed a year before, you really want to start all over again, because half of the thrill of making an album is actually the creative process, and so you leave as much as you can. But time, it's a question of balance. You go in the studio, you've got to be fairly well prepared, but you've got to leave the door open for spontaneity as well. I suppose there's a great similarity between an album I did with Roger Glover called Accidentally on Purpose, and an album I did with Steve Morris called Dreamcatcher. They're not like Deep Purple, of course. There'd be no point. I said at the beginning of this record to Michael Jackson, my MD and guitar player, and also to Nick Blagona, our producer, that I didn't want a single guitar solo on this record. I don't want any histrionic playing or performances, so if there was to be a guitar solo, I'd rather it was more like George Harrison than Yngwie Malmsteen, if you catch my drift, so that it flavours. And I wanted Ringo on drums too, so not that this is any way Beatlesque or anything like that, but it's song-driven, it's musical, we're surrounded by music, that's a 2-stroke engine. So when I mentioned about histrionics as far as the guitar solo is concerned, I wanted to do the same thing as far as the voice is concerned, just sing for the joy of it, and use the other instruments that you have to hand when you're using a voice, which is texture and expression and dynamics and um, soul and spirit. And sometimes when you're pushing it right at the top and yelling your nuts off from beginning to end on an album, you have to rely upon other elements to bring that dynamic to the record. So it's good to sing gently. My first introduction to rock music wasn't just Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis. It was also Buddy Holly and Elvis Presley. Elvis did gentle stuff as well as he didn't only do jailhouse rock. He did Love Me Tender and Heartbreak Hotel. So those elements are so often missing in rock music, and it's all for just the power. And it's nice to get off that rock and roll highway every now and again and take the scenic route. Texas State of Mind, when I first heard it, was on my tour, on the GILLAN's In tour, and I was singing backing vocals while Michael Jackson was singing it, and Rodney Appleby and myself and were doing BVs, and I said, I'm going to steal this song one day. What a great little Southern blues type of song that I could never have written, but boy, I love singing it. Great idea, Texas State of Mind, and it's all about a guy getting horny, can't wait to see his girl, and he's driving down there, and this is what's going through his mind. It's a good song. Musicians are basically, apart from Howard, we had Randy Cook on the road, but Howard was on the last album, and Rodney, who's still got the bullet in his neck, and Michael Lee Jackson, guitar, and MD, and creative manager, and then we augmented, and we had various people brought in for their expertise and their coolness. Joe Monona was on the road with me. Joe Monona was also on Accidentally on Purpose with Roger Glover. I've respected him ever since. He did the incredible sax solo in juxtaposition to Dr. John on I Can't Believe You Want to Leave on Accidentally on Purpose. One of the musical highlights of my entire life. I'm working harder now because I've got the chance to. I look back my early days, when I left school and started a band, and we'd look at Thursday nights and that was it. I think there's only one thing that's incumbent upon any artist, whether you're a writer or a performer, and that is to be expressive. If you are being expressive, then you're doing it right. I never keep anything. I sing in the shower, I sing when I walk along. I'm very optimistic. I look on the bright side of things. I think one of the great things about learning how to put a tune together, how to learn to make rhyme work, and understand that it's different to poetry, it's different to verse. Lyrics are completely, they're much more dependent upon the percussive value of consonants and the singability of a vowel, if you like. I mean, you've got to spend years understanding those things so that it's then second nature. I have no idea which idea is going to be on a Purple album or a solo album or whatever. I go to bed with a notebook. It's sad, I know, but true. And there's a lot of squiggly writing with no lights on that I find difficult to decipher in the morning or 3 weeks later. But yeah, it's very important to note things down, because if I see something on TV that drives me nuts or makes me laugh out loud, or I read something in a newspaper, or something crops up in conversation with one of my erudite friends, I have to write it down, because as in school you tend to remember it more, but even more important, you remember the flavour of the moment. And if you write down that this person was actually responding to a government statement or a statement by some pundit, then you'll know exactly what the context was, and so you can see whether it's irony or whether it's just plain got right up your nose. I mean, I've written um, over 400 songs, and I was truly shocked when I found that out last year. So, and they're like kids, you know. Some of them are excellent, and some of them are really, really bad. But you got to love them. The first, the most important thing to me is the sound of the voice and using it as an instrument. And because I've always been in bands, well, mostly, I've had to fit my voice in between the guitar and the rhythm section and on the gaps that they give me when they go, okay, you sing now. And so you've really got to try and make something exciting happen in a bit where they've gone down the pub, just to let you get on with it. And that's happened a lot. So I think you tend to develop a certain aptitude for getting the job done in those circumstances. Well, I write songs about my life and what happens to me. I don't write songs about things I don't know about. I write songs about how I'm affected by these things. So it can range from spirituality to politics to cultural things to basically just the pulse of humanity, which interests me greatly. Well, I often get asked about what do you think about modern music? What do you think about today's generation of artists and musicians? And I can't really say anything one way or the other without sounding either patronizing or disingenuous. I think, you know, I didn't like it if my parents made any comments at all about my music, whether it was good or bad. And if it was bad, I was just going, well, what do you expect? You just don't get it because you're the wrong generation. And if it was good, I didn't want to hear it. I preferred it when they didn't like it. So any favourable comments I took as being patronising. But that's particularly normal for, you know, whether you're at that age, you know. There's not just physical, but you can have intellectual vandalism as well, which is all about destroying what went before. And I think times have changed a lot. There wasn't that much around when I got my first recording contract, and now there's saturation point, and the whole ethos was different. I don't even know where to start because I don't know what they want. Image was always important, but it became much more to do with television image, and rock and roll doesn't come across well on TV. It's not a good medium for rock and roll. It's not big enough, and so everything became more intimate, and you know, I kind of lost it. I understand what digital recording is. We employ a lot of the techniques and the benefits of that, but most people will still prefer to capture the sound of the air in the room and leave gaps instead of that sort of 80s technique of filling every available space with a roaring sound or whatever. So I think we coexist. We're kind of just finishing our line, and they're just starting. I just tell you that my greatest form of amusement, if ever I'm depressed, you know, sitting in a hotel room and I want a good laugh, I watch MTV with the sound turned off, and that'll do it for me every time. Sometimes the smallest things can trigger a song idea, and it's amazing how this came about. I was doing the rehearsal and hadn't really finished the lyric. I just had this idea, lonely days, lonely nights, and I thought, oh, that's so bland, that means nothing. And Rodney said, and I said, I'm thinking of tearing up this. I do this a lot. I tear up the lyrics and start again. And Rodney said, well, supposing you look at it the other way, mate. He says, supposing this bitch is giving you you're just looking forward to some lonely days and lonely nights. And yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. And then I put it in the third person, and I was seeing, such terrible things, that the lascivious nature of the certain kinds of tabloid newspapers and certain types of online articles were devouring Amy Winehouse and Britney Spears. And I know how hard it is under normal circumstances, to make the transition from girl to woman. And these are talented kids. Amy Winehouse, one of the most God-given talents. I mean, but she had no experience, and she had no way of dealing with this, and yet there she is, shoved out in the limelight without being ready, and no one could see that. And I'm looking at her ravaged face and her despair. I watched her, oh dear, at Glastonbury. It was, I mean, that was one of her better gigs, and she's in a turmoil in there. And so the song is basically spelling this out and saying you need some lonely days and lonely nights. In other words, dump those, those friends, so to speak. That's all in the lyric. They must have practiced hard to get that bad. That's all I can say, the friends that she has. So hopefully she'll survive. The odds aren't good at the moment, but that's what the song's about. I'm not really a songwriter. I am, but I don't have much to do with the musical side. Occasionally I come up with something. And, I mean, my normal contribution is... which I played at home for 3 months before Bron just said one day, far be it for me to interfere, but will you get a song written to those stupid 2 chords? So I took that along to a session, and it became soon forgotten, although they didn't like the second bit that I wrote. So I handed it over to the mood of it, really, the essence of it, to the other guys. But there was another one that got firmly rejected because it only had 1 chord. On my protests that Ravel's Bolero only had 1 chord, didn't really wash, and it was cold board's over, hot one just begun. From the shivers to the fever, could be too much sun, etc., etc. The verses go that way, and then the chorus goes, I'm going to change my ways. It's all the same chord. I'm gonna change my ways, gonna change my ways. And so it goes on throughout the whole thing. You get instrumental breaks, and there's this driving, pulsing, never changing line that's going underneath. And I think that's the magnetic attraction of a song like that, and the ironic juxtaposition of the lyrics when you really do start changing your ways and start exploring some interesting melody lines as the song develops, and it's all about texture and dynamics and irony. And of course, at the very end, just like Ravel's Bolero, it does go ding, 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 and it ends in a relative key. But no, they didn't like that because it was all in E. But I think it's great, and it belongs on this record, not on a Deep Purple record, and so that's why it's the status of track 2. I'm very pleased with that song. I would love to tour with this, but there's no chance at all. I don't see a single chance in the next year, and so I think I'll probably take the conventional route of talking to as many radio stations, online, magazines, newspapers, to cover as much ground as possible, and hopefully get people to hear the record. I think that's probably the main task. But Deep Purple is my main job, and also Deep Purple's, I think, probably going to be making another record too, so that makes it even tighter. Well, there was a good question. What's going to become of me in 10 years' time when I'm 120? Would I still... I think probably I started off singing as a child, and I'll probably sing as long as I can. But, the unplugged thing, if Purple ever finishes... I might end up tapping my foot in a club somewhere. You came home last night drunk, smelled like gypsy rose. I don't know where you've been. Slim brought home your clothes, I'm gonna let you go. I can't stand it no more. You're gonna ruin me, babe, and I won't be mean no more. I'm gonna pack your suitcase, put you on that bus. Don't ask me where you gone. Leave it up to us, I'm gonna let you go. I can't stand it no more. You're gonna rule me, babe, and I won't be mean no more. Bit of harmonica. You know, and that's a sad old thing, isn't it? You know, but I'm sure with a pint of beer and a cigarette in my hands, not in England, of course, I'll be able to sort of play my way into oblivion.